If you would like to support me as a pattern designer, I do have the written pattern as a printable PDF for my Etsy store, and the link is down below in the show notes. It will include detailed instructions and special bonus patterns of the mama hen's baby chick, as well as a modification pattern to turn your hen into a rooster. Thanks in advance for supporting my designs. A portion of every pattern sale goes towards helping animals in need and find our furry friends forever homes. The chicken friend and her family, you're going to need double pointed needles. This is in size 11 or 8mm, tapestry needle, coarse scissors. Yarn of number 6 weight is what I'm using for the example. You can use any yarn you want, but it'll change the size of your chicken. So if you have some scrap yarn you want to use and it's not number 6, that's fine. This sample is going to be with a Bernay blanket by Yarnspirations, and the main color is going to be the speckles, and then I have 3 other colors for the cone, the beak, and for the eyes. And of course you're going to need some filler. We're going to start with the body, and we're going to work this with the double pointed needles in the round, and every stitch is going to be a knit stitch. So with color A, which for me is going to be the speckle color, which reminds me of a rooster that I had when I was growing up, who I named Spreckles. Okay, to begin with, we need to cast on some stitches onto our double pointed needles. So I'm going to take one of the needles and I'm going to cast on 6 stitches, and I'm going to cast on the long tail cast on method. And to do that, I'll show you a brief review, and if you need more detail on long tail cast on, you can look at the show notes for a special video that goes a little bit slower to help you cast on. But for right now, I'm just going to take an arm length of yarn because it's just for 6 stitches, and I'm going to put the tail end yarn towards me and the working yarn away from me, and I'm going to rest the tail end yarn on my thumb and the working yarn on my finger. I'm going to grasp the 2 strands with my pinky and ring finger towards my palm so that this string is taut, and then I'll take the double pointed needle and I will rest that in between the fingers on the yarn towards my palm, and then go down and counterclockwise around the thumb through the thumb hole, and then go clockwise around my finger yarn towards the palm, and take the yarn that's at the end of the needle through the thumb hole, and then release the yarn on my thumb and pull the tail end yarn towards me. And that creates 2 stitches. So I just have 4 more to go. But now I have a triangle attached to the needle, and I'm going to be then going with my needle counterclockwise around the thumb hole, through the thumb hole, clockwise around the finger yarn towards the palm, take the end yarn and go through the thumb hole, release the yarn on the thumb and pull the tail end yarn towards you. And one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we have the 6 stitches already. Whew. Let me cut this tail end so it's just a few inches long. Now I'm going to evenly divide the stitches onto 3 needles. So I'm going to take another needle and put 2 stitches on that needle. And then in between these 2 needles, I'll add the next stitches. And those are 2. Great. So now I have 3 needles, and I want to make sure that it's not twisted. So all the bumps need to face the inside of the needles, and all the stitches are on the outside. I'm going to turn it over, And now the yarn is on the right side, which is how a right-hand person would knit. So now I need to connect the 3 needles together so I can knit in the round. I call this needle 1, the needle that's horizontal is needle 2, and then the needle on my right is needle 3. I'm going to hold needle 1 and 2 together in my left hand, and I'm going to make sure the yarn's in the back, and then I'm going to take my 4th needle and insert it into the first stitch on my left needle. And I'm going to knit that. And that connected the round. So now I'm going to continue knitting all the 6 stitches. One more needle. And at first it's awkward, but don't worry, this will get comfortable after a few rounds. I find it easy to use a contrasting yarn to mark my round, so with every round I just lay the scrap yarn in between needle 3 and needle 1, and that way it'll remind me of a new round is coming. And so now I'm on round 2, and with round 2 I'm going to knit the row even. So now with round 3, I'm going to knit in the front and back of every stitch. I want to increase these 6 stitches into 12 stitches. So to knit front and back in every stitch, I'm going to knit in the front of the needle, and then I bring the yarn through, but I don't take the old stitch off the left needle yet. I twist the yarn and I knit towards the back of the needle. Whoops. Hopefully you can see this. Now I've created 2 stitches for that 1 stitch. So I'm going to take the old stitch off the left needle and we're done. So let's try that again, knitting front and back. Knit in the front. Wrap the yarn around, pull it through, twist the yarn towards the back of the stitch, go through the stitch, wrap the yarn around, go through, and then pull the old stitch off the left needle. Okay, I've increased 2 new stitches, so now I have 4 stitches on this needle. We'll try it for the rest of the round. Front and back. Oh look, my scrap yarn fell off. Luckily we know we need 4 stitches on each needle, so so far it's not too difficult to track where I'm supposed to be. See, there's 4 stitches, 2 here, so I know that's my 3rd needle. But I'll leave this scrap yarn on just as a reminder, and hopefully it'll stay on. So we'll do 1 more knit front and back. Come on. And last one. Okay. So remember, all even rows are going to be knit even. So row 4, we're going to knit. Row 5 is coming up, and for that row we are going to do a stitch increase again, and we're going to knit front and back of every stitch and turn the 12 stitches into 24. So you've had practice knitting in the front and back, so let's do it again. Insert the needle as if you're going to knit, wrap the yarn, pull the yarn through, twist over towards the back and feed your needle through the back of the needle. Wrap the yarn around, pull through the hole, and then take the old needle off the left needle. And now there should be 8 stitches on the new needle. 2, 4, 6, 8. Okay. I like these projects because you can make your chicken in a day. And so you have instant gratification. Row 7 is also an increase row, but for this row we're going to knit 3 stitches, and then the 4th stitch we'll knit front and back, and we'll be increasing this round with 6 stitches. So we'll knit the first 3, and then in the 4th stitch we're going to knit front and back. So now there's 5 stitches on the needle. Next 3 stitches we knit. Next stitch, the 4th stitch, we knit front and back. Needle number 2, knit the next 3 stitches. Fourth stitch, knit front and back. Again. Front and back. Now I have 30 stitches, 10 stitches on each needle. Always count your stitches as you go, and that way it will help you in the long run. So for rows 8 through 16, I'm going to knit even, and I think it's really important to have some sort of marker in case you lose track of your rows. So I'm going to put this in between the needles 3 and 1. And I'm going to knit rows 8 through 16, and I'll meet you back here when I finish row 16. This will be the last row to knit before you start decreasing. Okay, row 17 is going to be a decrease row, and we're going to decrease 6 stitches evenly. And so to do that, we're going to knit 3 and then knit 2 together on the 4th stitch. So let's start this first needle. 2, 3, and then we'll knit these 2 stitches together as if we're knitting 1 stitch. And then the next we'll knit 3. And then we'll knit these next 2 stitches together. Next needle, knit 3, knit 2 together. And I'm going to move my marker because I don't need to count a bunch of rows anymore. I just want to know the beginning and ending of a row. In rows 18 and 19, I am going to knit them even. Okay, row 21 is another decrease round, and for this round we're going to knit 2 stitches and then knit 2 together. So knit 1, knit 2, and then this 3rd stitch we're going to knit the 2 stitches together. And repeat this throughout the round. Now we're on row 22, and we're going to knit that row because it's an even row, and all even rows are knit. Okay, those are all the knit rows. Now we're going to do row 23, and this is going to be our bind off row. So we're going to bind off 17 of the 18 stitches. You bind off by knitting 2 stitches and then slipping the first stitch over the 2nd stitch. So there's the 2 stitches knit. You take the first stitch and you slip it over the 2nd stitch, so you have 1 stitch. And you always have to work with 2 stitches. Slip the first stitch over the 2nd stitch, and continue this in the round. Now I'm down to working with 3 needles instead of 4, and I just continue like I have been knitting the rounds. I'm now working, I have 2 needles with stitches on them and then 1 working needle with 1 stitch on it. I'm going to pick up the 2nd stitch and then slip the first stitch over that 2nd stitch to continue the bind off round. So now I'm going to stuff the body with some fiber fill, and I'll do a little bit at a time just to make sure I have the shape that I want for my bird. So you're going to have to manipulate the fiber to get the shape that you want. I think I like that shape. So we filled it, and now we have some ends to work on. I'm going to use a tapestry needle, and I like this tapestry needle, maybe you can see it if I'm like this, because it has kind of like a hook. I'm going to work on the bottom first. I see there's a little hole, so I'm just going to take my tapestry needle and I'm going to feed it through the original 6 stitches and pull it, and that should close the hole up just fine. And it doesn't matter which direction you go. I'm just wrapping it around each stitch and I'm pulling as I go. Instead of just cutting the tail, I kind of want to pull it through the front here, through the fiber, so that if it goes through the fiber fill, it's gonna make it so the yarn won't come loose. And I can also pull from the center so that there's no little point underneath. So now that's in there, and keep that as filler as well. And now we're gonna sew the seam in the center. And the way we're going to sew the seam in the center is called a whip stitch. And essentially all that is just taking a stitch from each side. So there's 2 strands for each stitch. I'm only going to take the outside strand of each stitch and pull that in. But just make sure it's matched up. The great thing about this kind of yarn is that it hides any imperfections or mistakes that are made. So you can make a mistake and it's still gonna look fine. Before I finish closing this, I'm gonna be working on the face. So that's next. So far, we've got the tail and we've got the center seam almost done, a little more than halfway. And so now we're going to work on embroidering the beak and the eyes. Okay, I've got this mustard color that I'm going to use for the beak. I'm going to cut off 20 inches. That's more than enough that you're going to need, but it's better to have more length than less. And we're going to use this for the beak. So we're going to create the beak in the center of row 19 of the body. To find the center, you can just crease your seam, and then the tip would be your center. And then you're going to count down from 23, starting with this row here under the bind off would be the 23 row, 22, 21, 20, 19. Okay, this is 19. Okay, so I have the center of the stitches on row 19, and what I want to do is go 1/2 stitch over to the left, over to my left, and I'm going to stick the tapestry needle out, and then I'm going to put my finger in from the inside to find the tapestry needle. There's my finger, and I'm going to put my thumb there to mark it, and then I'm going to insert my tapestry needle from the inside and go out to where the thumb marker is, which is the row 19. And then I'm going to pull through and leave a tail of yarn on the inside of the body. Now I'm going to go over 2 whole stitches with the beak. So 2 whole stitches would be 1 stitch, 2 stitch, which would be 4 strands, because 2 strands make up 1 stitch. So 1 strand, 2 strand, 3 strand, 4 strand. And I'm going to go directly across. I'm going to feed it through the fiber and go up. And then I'm just going to repeat this process to have 2 strands for the beak. So I'm going to go through the fiber, and then back through. And the reason I go through the body cavity is I want the string to go through the fiber so that it doesn't come loose later and it holds its shape. And then you can manipulate this little bit, make it a little triangle-y at the bottom. Just adjust the beak how you want it to look. I like that. And so then I'm going to tie these pieces together. And then I'm going to take my string and I'm going to push it all the way through the fibers, through the bottom of the piece. And then I'm going to pull it through. I'm going to cut it at the base and then take a needle to stuff that contrasting yarn back in the body. Okay, now that we have the beak, we're going to insert the eyes. And the eye placement is going to be the same row of the beak, so row 19. And they're going to be one stitch over from the right and from the left. So we'll get the strand of yarn, about 20 inches again. And we're going to start with the chicken's right eye. So we're going to go from the inside, and I know row 19 is here, and I want to go one stitch over to start. So I want to go in here. So I'll use my finger as a gauge, and I'll go from the inside of the bird to my finger. And I'm going to leave a little bit of a tail. And then I'm going to stitch this one full stitch over. So I'm going to go to the two strands would make one stitch. I'll go through here and I'll go back up through the body. And then I'm going to repeat the same process. I'm going to make another round like I did for the beak, but I'm going to do it for the eyes. And I'm going to make the round go a little closer though, because I just want more volume than I want width and height for the eye. So I'm going to go through, and then I'm going to go into the same sections again, over one whole stitch. There's the eye. Okay, now I'm going to go to the left side of the bird, the same exact thing. I'm going to skip one whole stitch, and then I'm going to be working on this section to the outside of the body. And I'm going to stitch over one stitch. And now I've got to manipulate it a little bit so that the eyes look how I want them to. It seems like the yarn's a little too tight, so I'm going to pull it out to loosen it. I'm going to tie the yarn loosely, stuff it into the body, and then I'll feed this tapestry needle through the bottom of the piece. Okay, so before I continue, I'm going to use a little bit more fiber to stuff the chicken. So the next thing I have to do is finish seaming up the top, and I'm just going to use that whip stitch again to do those last few stitches. Just go from the outside to the inside of the outer half of the stitch on each side. I'm going to feed it through the body and make the tapestry needle come out through the bottom. Oh, came out over there. Now we're going to start on the cone of the chicken, and to do that you're going to find the last whip stitch that you did, which is up here on the top of the crown. Locate row 23 just below it, which is right here, and this is where you're going to start the crown. And you're going to do that by picking up one stitch on row 23, and I'm going to use the maroon color here to use as my crown. And I'm going to pick up one stitch, and I'm going to create a loop with a tail, and I'm going to feed it onto the end of the needle, and then I'm going to feed that through row 23 stitch, just like that. And then I'm going to make that a knit stitch with the working yarn by wrapping the yarn around the needle and then feeding that through the stitch, and there's my one knit stitch. And then I'm going to pull the strings to tighten it. Then I'm going to take the second double pointed needle and I'm going to knit front and back of that pickup stitch to create 2 stitches. So I'm going to knit in the front, and then I'm going to knit in the back. That's row 2. I'm going to turn it around for row 3, and I'm going to knit the 2 stitches. So this is row 3. I'm going to turn it around, row 4, and then I'm going to turn it around again for row 5. And that's what it'll look like. And then for row 6, I'm going to knit 2 stitches and then pick up a stitch from the last whip stitch. So I'm going to knit 2. And then I'm going to pick up the 2 stitches from the last whip stitch. I'm going to slip the yarn around the needle and slip it through the whip stitch to create a 3rd stitch. I'm going to turn the work. In row 7, I'm going to knit 3 stitches. In row 8, I'm going to turn the work, and I'm going to knit 2 stitches, bind off 1 stitch, knit 1 stitch, and then pick up a stitch. So we're going to knit 2 stitches, bind off 1 stitch, I'm going to knit the next stitch. There's 2 stitches on the needle, and now I'm going to pick up the next whip stitch on the back. So the last one was here, and now I'm going to pick up the next stitch, which is right here. I'm going to get the 2 strands of the whip stitch on, and I'm going to slip the yarn around the needle and slip it through the whip stitch. So I have 3 stitches on again. Row 9, I'm going to knit these 3 stitches. I'm going to turn the work. In row 10, I'm going to bind off 2 stitches. So I knit the first 2. I bind off 1, I knit the next stitch, bind off the second stitch, and I'm down to 1 stitch, and now I'm going to pick up 1 more stitch from the whip stitches, I'm going to slip the yarn around the needle and pass that yarn through the whip stitch. I'm going to bind off the second stitch. I'm going to cut a tail of the yarn. I'm going to leave like 10 inches. And I'm going to slip this tail end through the last stitch. Okay, so it's a little wonky and there's a hole right there. So I'm going to take this tail end yarn and put it on a tapestry needle, and then I'm going to sew the crown to make it more jagged and to look more like a crown how I want it to look. This is what it looks like so far. It's looking pretty good, but I want to get that hole and secure that into the head as well. And this is the crown. She's looking pretty good. Next, we're going to work on the tail. So we're going to start with the stitches that are on the very end of the tail. And we'll start with the first whip stitch here. And we'll take our needle and we'll slip it through the whip stitch, and we'll pick up the stitch by wrapping the yarn around it, slipping it through, and we're going to knit this stitch just by wrapping the yarn around the needle and slipping it through that pickup stitch. And then you're going to pull the tail end to pull it tight, so it looks like that. You'll turn your work, and then you're going to knit in the front and back of this pickup stitch to create 2 stitches. We're going to turn the work now. So now rows 3, 4, and 5 we're going to knit. Turn the work, row 4 knit, row 5, now in row 6 we're going to knit 2 stitches, and then we're going to pick up the first stitch on row 23 of the body. So we're going to knit 2, and then we're going to skip that bump and we're going to go to row 23, which is just below it. We're going to wrap the yarn around to pick it up and go through the stitch to create our pickup stitch. So now we have 3 stitches. We're going to turn the work and we're going to knit. Turn the work, and row 8 we're going to knit 2 stitches, bind off 1 stitch and knit 2 stitches, and then pick up another stitch. So we're going to knit 2, we're going to bind off the first stitch, We're going to knit 1, and now we're going to pick up 1 stitch from row 22, which is the next row below the piece. So we're going to pick up the stitches from row 22, wrap the yarn around the needle, and then slip it through. So now we have 3 stitches. I'm going to turn the work, and row 9, we're going to knit 3 stitches. Turn your work, and we're going to knit 3 stitches and pick up 1 stitch on row 21. So knit the 3, and then we'll find row 21 just below the project, which is right here. We'll pick up the stitches on this row, wrap the yarn around, and slip it through, and we have 4 stitches. We're going to turn the work, and we're going to knit the 4 stitches. Okay, it's almost there. So we're going to turn the work, and then for row 12, we're going to bind off 3 stitches. So first we have to knit 2. Here's our first bind off. Knit the next. Bind off our second stitch. Knit the next. Bind off our third stitch. And then we're going to pick up a stitch from the next row, which is row 20. And we're going to slip that through, and then we're going to bind off the next stitch. Now before we take this stitch, we're going to cut a tail, and we're going to slip the tail through the last stitch and pull. Now we're going to take the yarn tails and we're going to weave it through, so I'm going to feed that through the body. Okay, to create the wings, and to do that, I'm going to turn it so its beak is facing my left side, and I'm going to count 2 stitches over from the eye. 1, 2, and it's going to be placed on the same row as the eye, which is row 17. So I'm going to be starting my wing this way. So I'm then going to turn the chicken for its beak to face me, and I'm going to pick up 5 stitches, starting at row 17. So I'm going to slip my needle through the first row. I'm going to use my matching thread, but you can use contrasting color or pick any color you want. Slip the yarn over the needle and then slip it through. And I'm not going to knit it, I'm just going to keep slipping stitches. I'm going to pick up the next stitch. There's the second one. I'm going to get the third stitch. And then we're going to do the 4th stitch. And then the 5th stitch. There we go, we've got 5 stitches. So I'm going to turn the work, and this is for the left side. I'm going to purl this row because I'm knitting this flat. And I want a knit stitch to be on the top part of the wing. So for row 2, we're going to purl. Pull that yarn tail to make it tight. Turn the work. Row 3, we're going to knit. Now for row 4, we're going to turn the work, and then we're going to purl 2 together, knit 1, and purl 2 together. We're going to decrease 2 stitches. So the first 2 stitches we're going to purl together. Knit the next stitch, and purl the next 2 stitches together. Turn the work. Row 5, we're going to knit 1 stitch and knit the next 2 together. Turn the work. And then row 6, we're going to slip the first stitch, purl the second stitch, and then we're going to bind off the first stitch, and then we're going to take a long tail and cut it and slip the tail through the last stitch. So we'll feed the tapestry needle with the yarn. And then we're going to just whip stitch through every other row of the wing on the side. Tighten it and then attach it into half the stitch. And then this is where you want to do any correcting. Like, I don't like to see this bump right here, so I'm going to feed my yarn up through the wing, and then I'm going to go back down it just to make it look pretty. I like that. Now we're going to do the right side of the wing, and we're going to go to the right eye. We're going to turn it so the beak is to our right. And we're going to count 2 rows to the left of the eye. 1, 2, and it's going to be the same row, row 17, to pick up 5 stitches. I'm just going to feed the needle through the row where I'm going to start the pickup. I'm going to turn the chicken so the beak's facing me, and I will pick up 5 stitches. Slip the yarn over the needle and slip it through the first stitch. Feed it through. I'm going to go to the next stitch over. I'm going to feed the yarn counterclockwise, and then I'm going to pull the yarn so it doesn't get lost when I'm picking up the stitch. I'm going to feed it through. You might have to turn the chicken to manipulate it to get the stitch to be picked up. I'm going to go to the next stitch, pick up the stitches, feed the yarn through counterclockwise, turn the yarn to help pick up the stitch. There's 3 stitches. Now I'm going to go to the 4th stitch. Feed the yarn. And I'm going to go to the last stitch. So there, I've picked up the 5 stitches for the right wing. And now I'm going to turn the work and I'm going to do row 2. Okay, for row 2 of the wing, we're going to knit the right side. And turn the work. Row 3, you're going to purl. Row 4, we're going to knit 2 together, knit 1, and knit 2 together. We're decreasing 2 stitches. So the first 2 stitches, we're going to knit 2 together, knit 1, and knit 2 together. Row 5, we're going to purl 1, purl 2 together. Now we're down to 2 stitches. Row 6, we're going to slip the first stitch, knit the next stitch, and then we're going to bind off the first stitch. Then we're going to take a long tail and cut it. And then we'll slip the tail of yarn through the remaining stitch. So I'm going to take the tail end and I'm going to thread it through a tapestry needle, where I'm going to sew down the edge of the chicken's wing to tighten it up a little bit. So for the legs, it's going to be 1 strand that's going to be sewn in through the body. And so for this, I'm going to hand crochet it. Okay, I've got about 40 stitches. This is about 8 or 9 inches. I'm going to cut the yarn and then feed it through the loop here and tighten it, but I'm not going to cut my tails yet because I then need to feed this through the chicken. So I will thread my tapestry needle with one of the ends. I'm going to feed this leg so that it matches the location of the eyes. So I'm going to match the eyes, and it's going to be about 8 rows up and go into the same row as the eye and go to out the same row as the other eye, which is about here. And I'm going to feed the whole piece through, and it's caught some fiber, which is okay. Just want to make sure that the legs are even, and they are. And while I have this needle threaded on this side, I'm going to make the claws. So I'm going to make 3 loops, and that'll turn into the claws. So to do that, I'm going to go through the first stitch of the claw 3 times. 1, There's the first claw. There's another claw, and then 3. And then I'll feed it through the leg one more time. And then cut the end. So there's the claw. And then we'll do the same for the other leg. So now I'm finishing up my last claw, feeding it through the leg and cutting off any extra yarn. And here we have it, my little chicken hen. So now let's make her some friends.